Well, welcome back, dear viewers, to the RPG Imaginarium. As you can see, this is not my usual Imaginarium, but here we will still seek to catalog what can be ostensibly considered the best traditional gaming stories the internet has to offer. Tonight, we bring you, from one of the most truly revolutionary tabletop games to come out of Japan, a story from Maid the RPG, as posted by an anonymous user on 4chan's TG board that is known as the PG Wodehouse Maid campaign. As always, a link to the original will be posted below. I promised I would share a story time, but then I lost my motivation, and today I felt like it would be kind of shitty to go back on my promise. So I'll share the abridged version of it anyway. Before we start, there are two important things I need to mention where we deviated from the Maid system. We didn't use the random tables, we just collectively made up the characters together with the GM. And the way we got awarded favor wasn't only by getting favor from the master, but also adhering to our secret motivations, kind of like how the points are acquired in Everybody is John. It all started with the message from Mother Dearest, like it always does in the Wodehouse novels. The message told us that our master, the Oshu-sama, was required to attend a ball, where she would have to mingle with the other nobles in order to find herself a suitable suitor. In retrospect, it's kind of weird we called the Mistress Ojo-sama, when literally everyone else used the Western names, but whatever. So, there are 4 servants, right? Margaret, a perverted lesbian whose main motivation was to get into the pants of Ojo-sama. Literally every other servant player called her a crazy dyke. Sebastian, an apprentice butler, a young boy head over heels in love with Ojo-sama. He was a pretty basic kid, wanted to become a man worthy of the mistress's attention, and confess his love to Ojo-sama. Miss Watson, a shy girl with braided hair and round spectacles. Her main motivation was to witness the blooming love of Ojo-sama from the sidelines, a classic romantic, a stalker, and a fucking yandere. And finally Jeeves, my character, a servant who served this house for almost 30 years, and is honor-bound to Ojo's late father to protect Ojo-sama from the most unpleasant aspects of aristocratic life, currently the head of the servant of the mansion. Again, we weren't informed of each other's motivations and had to figure them out and gain from our actions. In any case, none of the servants were all too thrilled about the orders, but we couldn't really go against Mother Dearest's wishes, because she technically owns the manor where Ojo-sama and the servants live, even if she got it from her late husband and isn't actually Ojo's mother, but rather his stepmother. We technically have to attend a ball in 2 days, and yet it's in our best interest to stealthily sabotage the event. So the problems start from the very beginning, because Margaret apparently can't keep her lesbo in her pants. The very first situation me and Miss Watson had was to defuse the crazy dyke breaking into Ojo's room in hopes of some steamy lesbo sex, because if she is to be engaged and I can't have her, then I'd rather engage in our forbidden love right now. The next few days are not very interesting, it's basically just role-playing, GM setting the scene, and players competing for favor, so I won't detail them. Anyway, in 2 days, Mother Dearest arrives in her lavish and pompous carriage. Sebastian and I run distracting her while Margaret and Miss Watson sabotage the carriage she came in hopes that if we can't go to the ball, we won't need to do shit. It almost works too, but they fail some checks and almost get caught in the act, so, unfortunately, Ojo has to attend the ball. And guess fucking what? We are drafted to assist in the ball's proceedings. This might be the chance we were looking for, .jpg. When we arrive, I cite being the head servant, so I remain with Ojo-sama while rather unsubtly hinting to the other players to fuck shit up. Margaret is stellar at seducing random nobles right in front of everyone and making them do stupid shit, laughing when they make fools of themselves in front of Ojo-sama and Mother Dearest. Miss Watson fucks shit up at the kitchen, making shit completely inedible even if it looks perfectly fine and mixing up the orders. Sebastian is doing his best to run distraction and does some really ridiculous shit like releasing a flock of peacocks someone brought them with into the ballroom. And I'm accompanying Ojo and Mother Dearest while she unsuccessfully tries to find a suitable suitor, who are all too busy being seduced by Margaret, throwing up for Miss Watson's food, or getting shit on by peacocks. At some point, Mother Dearest goes into a fucking tantrum, saying that she will find a husband for her stepdaughter in this place, like it or not. I have been waiting for this, tiff. I unleash the most fucking savage bants I manage upon Mother Dearest, saying that she is a disgrace to the family, that her husband would be ashamed to see her trying to hook up her daughter with these unworthy retards in a horrible place like this, etc. She tries to disagree, but even she can't deny how fucking horrible the service has been in this place, and how people complain like complete retards, thanks to her interference, but she doesn't know that. And then Miss Watson appears out of nowhere and proceeds to use the ultimate retort, using even more savage insults than I've managed and unleashing her inner yandere, saying that Ojo-sama deserves a prince on a white horse, not these godforsaken pigs in human clothing. That face when we just publicly shamed our employer and got away with it. At this point, we basically go home immediately with the danger of our Ojo-sama being engaged to some aristocratic bumfuck safely averted. There's way more to this campaign, like the time we went to France, but this is the gist of how my Jeeves transformed into the I would rather slip into a fucking coma character. Here's the banquet story. Alright, fine, I won't dwell on it too much, but to the gist of it, we find out there are 3 fucklord barons in on a plot to defame Ojo's family name. They are in the Mother Dearest's Good Boy book, so we can't really do shit about them officially. So, as always, we have to concoct a ridiculous scheme about how we're going to deal with them. Anyway, we hear about this banquet and that 2 of these 3 fucktards are going to attend. Margaret practically jumps at the opportunity, planning to cuck literally every noble present there with steamy illicit dyke sex, and well, as our head servant, I'm pretty much the only one who gets to veto the plan, and who am I to deny a woman her pleasures? So we send the formal introduction letter, signed by a name of some distant cousin of Ojo that is guaranteed to not turn up at the banquet, and replace his photo with Margaret's photo in a suit. Anyway, in a few days, just before the banquet, Miss Watson finds out that the 3rd guy will be alone on a hunting trip, and she's gonna kidnap and torture him, both for information and to send a message that no one fucks with the Ojo and gets away with it. In reality, the player just said he would be absent for the next session, so we had to make adjustments for it. And in general, we figured that grabbing them by the balls and sending them a message to not fuck with their mistress was a good idea. In any case, Miss Watson has to leave for her subplot, leaving us 3 to pick up the mess that is the banquet. So, again, a few days pass and it's time for the banquet. The 3 of us arrive, posing as Margaret's servants, except Houston, there's a fucking problem, couples only. So we have to come up with a solution on the spot. We can't drag Ojo-sama into this mess, Miss Watson is away, and there are no readily available females to help us. So we come up with a plan to literally on spot to dress Sebastian in drag and make him pose as Margaret's wife. I managed to steal the luggage of some dame that came to this event, and voila, we got a dress for our pretty boy. A hastily put on dress, a bit of hairstyling for me, and a few tips from the local turbo lesbian in a suit, and the pretty boy looks like grade A waifu material. Finally, we enter the ball, me being allowed in this as a servant, and as soon as we enter, Margaret immediately separates from our group to drink, mingle, and flirt with local wives, because she just can't keep her shit in her pants, leaving us 2 to figure out where the nobles are and how to grab them by the balls. This is where the most hilarious part begins. We finally catch up to Margaret, and with her help apparently, aristocratic gossip is useful. We locate the 2 fucks, and Sebastian has this glorious plan that obviously can't go wrong. He wants to seduce them, and as the guy whose affection is middling at best, he needs help from the local dyke as a prompter. Basically, she provides the dialogue, he provides the charm, and seduces the 2. While I'm trying to look serious on the outside and not to die from laughter on the inside. The entire scene that happens next looks like something straight from a sitcom. We barely succeed by the skin of our teeth, setting up a date with both men in a secluded wine cellar. Margaret again storms off somewhere, saying that she got a hilarious idea. Anyway, me and Sebastian are waiting in the cellar for both men to come, and after a bit of waiting, and 2 short scuffles in the darkness, we got both of them unconscious, lying on the floor of the basement. That's when Margaret barges in with a photo camera. She manages to nick off someone on the banquet. She proposes we take photos of them in compromising positions, implying buggery, leave 1 copy to both men with a letter to threaten to distribute them, unless they cease their faggotry both to Oju and in general. Obviously, who am I to refuse a woman her pleasures? And that's how we got rid of those 2 blackmailing fucks, turning the tables on them. The trip to France. Alright, so the trip to France is kind of a long one and happened after the Retarded Aristocrats episode. So after the Retarded Aristocrats episode, where we had to babysit the retarded children of Auntie Dearest, she was really impressed by how mature Ojo-sama is and the professionalism of her servants. To provide context, it was a clusterfuck of grandiose proportions where we only managed to keep things in hand simply by virtue of pure luck and coincidence. Anyway, Auntie Dearest, the sister of Mother Dearest, was not actually our aunt. Is there a word for it? Step-aunt invited us to her vacation house somewhere in the Normandy for a few weeks. Naturally, people were excited about the trip. Miss Watson and the Ojo were especially excited about seeing Paris with their very own eyes, so we agreed to go, even despite the fact that we had to deal with these retards again. Anyway, the problem started even before we left our manor. Apparently, Mother Dearest heard about our little excursion, and while she was a bit tied up in some ambitious political plot in England, and thus couldn't go with us, she still wanted us to run errands while we were in France. So she gives us a rather lengthy list of the French nobles we have to pay a visit of courtesy to. Begrudgingly, we have to accept because we really can't bite the hand that feeds us, etc. even if we still try to find 1,000 excuses to not do it, and fail at it. Anyway, it's time to leave for France, and to get to France we have to cross the Strait of Dover. And to cross the Strait of Dover we have to board the ferry. And that's when Margaret manages to start a fire on a ferry. The story about how she manages to start a fire on a ferry is worthy of a separate account, really. Everything is peachy when we board the ferry, and it's not like it will take us more than a few hours to cross the channel, even if this is bad weather. But it's still like a few hours and people get antsy about waiting. The Ojo chooses to read a book she brought with herself, I keep guard of her, Miss Watson is showing to Sebastian the basics of stitching and knitting, and Margaret decides to take a walk and stretch her legs. Obviously the crazy dog just can't help herself and ends up at the engine area, where she isn't supposed to be. Surprisingly, there are no sailors around, and that's when Margaret gets a brilliant idea of dragging a woman to this secluded area, and using the world for two to have a makeout session with a random girl she picked out when she was boarding the ferry. Basically, she gets 5 interrupted minutes alone with a person. In hindsight, it would have also helped seduce the Ojo, if it wasn't for me having a counter to her ability. Anyway, 5 minutes plus Reckless Dyke plus Engineeria equals bad things happening. The Francis coast is literally in sight when Margaret barges into her cabin, breathing heavily, and when we ask her what's wrong, she claims with a chipper voice, "Nothing's wrong." That's when we hear her scream from outside the cabin, "Fire!" Basically, long story short, we pack up in less than a minute and board one of the only 2 emergency boats even faster while everyone is busy panicking. We safely make it to the French port, pointedly ignoring the screams coming from behind us. Okay, so to continue the story, after all is said and done, we are finally in France. Obviously, everyone is excited about seeing another country for the first time in their lives. Seriously, we spent hours during the entire trip simply bantering about those crazy Frenchmen and their silly customs. Anyway, we need to find and hire a carriage to get the Auntie Dearest's estate, but it's already late and the weather is rotten, so we decide to stay for the night in the local hotel. This is where we realize a critical flaw in our plan that somehow everyone conveniently forgot. Not a single person among the servants speaks French. The only one who has even a slightly passable French skills is Ojo-sama because of her private tutoring lessons. And that would have been mostly fine because despite her rather delicate nature, Ojo-sama is a shrewd person who is capable of handling her finances, but, and this is a very big but, when we have already settled for the night in 2 different rooms, males and females separately, which irks me to no end because while Miss Watson is a rather mature person, I simply don't trust Margaret to handle herself around Ojo-sama when alone. Anyway, when we have already settled for the night in 2 different rooms, a rather gruff-looking gentleman in uniform knocks on Ojo-sama's door. Because somebody simply couldn't keep it in her pants, the local police wants to bring us in for questioning about what happened at the ferry that somehow spontaneously combusted. Profuse sweating.gif. I immediately trespass on the scene, not trusting them to handle it themselves, and, in an absolutely retarded scene of what basically amounts to a game of Chinese whispers, I manage to relay through Ojo-sama that she is a proud member of a noble house, and I will not allow her to be treated like a commoner. So, if he wants to conduct questioning, he'd better do it here and now and fast, so that he won't intrude upon Ojo's sleep time. The funniest thing about the whole affair was the dialogue between me and Ojo, because while Ojo was cooperative, my honor as a servant dictated that others should treat Ojo-sama with nothing less than profound respect. And so we bickered in the spirit of, "Jeeves, it's fine," and "No, Ojo-sama, we cannot allow this Frenchman to treat you like this. You must command proper respect from the commoners." Miss Watson pretty much supported my point of view through the entire encounter, while Margaret quietly shrinked away into the dark corner of the room, afraid that she would be recognized by the policemen. Anyway, we finally managed to convince the policeman that we didn't know shit about ferry combusting, and make her swear that we won't be bothered about this anymore, so it's finally time for us to sleep. Surprisingly, I don't even have to trespass that night again because Margaret doesn't attempt anything untoward as she usually does. In the morning, we finally managed to find a carriage, and with a lot of broken French from Ojo-sama and a lot of gestures and pointing at a map coming from us, we are finally set for Auntie Dearest's mansion. The journey takes 2 days and proceeds mostly without incident, during which we are mostly role-playing and trying to figure out what the fuck are we going to do if not a single one of us speaks French. In any case, after 2 days, 3 changed carriages, and another night in a hotel, we are finally there. After what happened during the Retarded Aristocrats episode, we cautiously expect to be met with Auntie's retarded children, but thankfully most of them aren't there, and the only one who is there is suspiciously quiet and polite. I would be quiet and polite too in his place after what happened to him, and that's a story for another time. We exchange pleasantries with Aunt Dearest that shows us our accommodations, informs us where the facilities are, and asks us to provide 2 of us to instruct the servants here because she was really impressed by our professionalism. At first we start to bicker with who gets to stay with Ojo-sama, but then Sebastian suddenly agrees to be one of the instructors, and we later found out why, because a pretty boy realized that he could learn passable French from the local servants. The rest of us draw lots, and it's Margaret who draws the short stick. Anyway, the next day we separate because it's time for courtesy visits to the local nobility. Thankfully, we don't have to go far because the French are just as fond of gated communities, of aristocratic fucks as the English are, and Margaret and Sebastian go their way, while Miss Watson, me, and Ojo-sama go our respective way. Honestly, the whole courtesy visit is not that interesting. We basically go in, stand guard over Ojo-sama while she has tea with one noble or another. That is until we encounter that fucker. Imagine Gaston if he was gay aristocratic fencer that you have that fucker in a nutshell. The first thing the fucker does is switch to English and subtly insult Ojo-sama, that, while I don't enjoy speaking the language of those barbarians, your French is simply atrocious, my dear. After only a few minutes of listening to his trite bullshit and witnessing Ojo-sama take it straight out of his mouth, our stress ratings rise to the roof. The first one who snaps is Miss Watson, and I have to physically restrain her from murdering the little faggot. That is until he mentions, "It is unfortunate that your mother had to marry such an uncultured man as your father. After all, my dear, you've taken the best traits of your mother." At this point, I just stopped caring and challenged the fuckboy to a duel. To provide context, the backstory of G's is that I served under Ojo-sama's father command during an unspecified war. Never really worked out which war was the most plausible for me to have participated in, and he saved my life numerous times, so I gave him a pledge of honor. I became a servant as soon as I returned from war and served him and his family ever since. So in my eyes, Ojo's late father is pretty much a man worth hundredfold of other men. Anyway, the little fucker thinks that it would be amusing to fight an old man like me, so he accepts the duel until first blood. All the while Ojo-sama watches in horror but doesn't really do anything to stop me, and upon closer examination she actually seems happy that I came to her defense, even if horrified that I, an old man in my late 40s, will have to fight this athletic young upstart. I assign Miss Watson as my second, while the fucker assigns one of his servants. It's obvious that the little aristocratic prick is confident in his fencing skills. On a somewhat unrelated note, I'm pretty good at micromanaging my stress and favor, so with this whole encounter I've been carefully spending favor to keep my stress level just below the stress explosion threshold. And good fucking riddance, because a GM has been assigning a stress like giving out candy during this entire encounter. And just guess what my stress explosion is. That's right, it's violence. So when the duel starts and the little prick taunts me with his faggoty little épée, I simply stop spending favor. This is when I get mad. 19th century flashbacks intensify. When the duel starts, I pretty much throw away the épée I was given for the duel. Not like I would know what to do with it anyway, and go for the Fag Lord with my fist. The combination of the Fag Lord not expecting me to use my fist and athletics being my high attribute allows me to pound on the Fag Lord mercilessly. What's important to note is that the duel is happening outside in his garden at this point. I ask the GM to describe the surroundings. What catches my attention in the GM's description is a big fancy fountain right next to us. You have to know what's coming next. I grab the fuckboy by his collar, who looks a lot worse for the wear after I've done my fisticuffs magic on him, and start the waterboarding session. It's at this point pretty much everyone present for the duel has to physically restrain me and drag me away from the dude. Surprisingly, it's Miss Watson who provides the most assistance, and not the other second. In retrospect, me and Miss Watson have a lot in common. Both of us had athletics as high stats, both of us had violent stress explosion trigger, both of us did our best to protect Ojo-sama from various shitty aspects of reality. I guess the only real difference was how we approached the problem, that and she was a fucking yandere. Anyway, this is when I start spending accumulated favor again, and combined with the standard rules for stress, I easily get to 0 stress threshold, at which point I can act normally again. I start to profusely apologize to Ojo-sama for overreacting, and Ojo-sama profusely apologizes in return for letting someone else get mad on her behalf, not protecting herself like a problem noble is supposed to. All the while, Miss Watson is simply shaking her head at what all just happened. All in all, this counts as a happy ending of that particular encounter in my book, although not of the entire trip to France. I have to take a break for a bit, but I'll continue the story later. Thank you all once again for tuning into another RPG Imaginarium. We're glad you enjoy these videos and stories. If you enjoyed this video and want more like it, how about giving us a like and subscribing to our channel? We're always glad to hear your feedback, and if you have a story you'd like us to read, go ahead and send us a link, whether it's your story or posted somewhere else. And of course, we will credit you in the original poster. We also have that all-new, newfangled social media you can follow us on, and if you'd like to support us financially, how about you check out our resident GM Chaz's books on Amazon Kindle. A special thanks to 4chan's TG board and Reddit and their associated archives and subreddits for providing such great stories. Thanks again, and stay caffeinated.